Hey guys, Tim from Tim's Tiny Arcade, and today I want to talk about a topic that's a little bit different, but I think it'd be kind of a fun topic. Back in the day, the Atari 2600 had a ton of games that they put on the Atari 2600 that were actually arcade games that were ported to the system. Asteroids, Warlords, Space Invaders, you name it. If it was in the arcade, they tried to put it on the Atari 2600. Some good, some bad, you know. But what if we were going to talk about some games that were on the Atari 2600 that were not in the arcade, but maybe should have been in the arcade? And we're going to talk about Activision. They were a company that made games for the Atari 2600. And for the most part, except at the end of their tenure of making games for the Atari 2600, most of their games were just original titles. And I've picked out 5 games that I think would have been great in the arcade. They were great on Atari 2600, but I think they would have been great in the arcade also. And we're going to take a look at my 5 games that I've chosen. Let's jump into it, guys.
Voice of Duke Nukem, and you're watching Tim's Tiny Arcade, mother effer.
All right, so jumping into my list, no particular order of 5 games that were made from Activision. The first game I'm going to choose is going to be Kaboom. We'll do a little gameplay, and we'll talk about this, why this would have been a great arcade port. All right, guys, so the first game we're going to do is Kaboom, and we're going to play this on the Legends Ultimate because I think this is a great way to kind of display the arcade style of playing an Activision game. What it would have kind of been like playing in the arcade. I got a spinner here on this, and kind of like one that would have been for Tempest back in the arcade, and I think this would have been great in the arcade. Let's go ahead and try this a little bit. So, object of the game, 3 buckets. Got to catch the bombs that the bomber's dropping, and the game ramps up just like any arcade game would back in the day. And it gets pretty hard pretty quickly. I think that a lot of people would have dropped a lot of quarters into this game, and a lot of these games don't last a long time, so it could have made a lot of money for people back in the day. I think this would have been a good game to have a high score list, and I don't remember. I think this game went to like 9,999 and maybe stopped. In arcade, you could have went farther, and if you were good enough. See, quick. Very rusty at this game. This game takes a lot of practice. Ooh, down to 1 bucket, guys. You don't get another one until 1,000 points, so the odds of me getting one are pretty slim. Oh, let's try one more here. Boom, a quarter would have been gone in the arcade, and I probably would have popped another one in to try to beat that score, especially if this would have had a high score list. But Kaboom, I think, would have been a great game in the arcade. Let's jump into another Activision game that I think would have been a great arcade game. All right, so the next game that I chose is a shooter, and you're going to see some shooters in this list because there were a lot of shooters in the arcade. But I chose Beam Rider. Now, Beam Rider, I don't know if a lot of people played this game. It's a harder game to find. But if you can play this on the Atari 2600, give it a shot. I'm going to do a little gameplay of it, and we'll talk about why we think it would have been a great game to possibly been in the arcade back. All right, we're going to try some Beam Rider, guys. A lot of space games back in the day. This would have been right up in the alley of a lot of games. You have these different lines where the enemies will come down. And like I said in the last game, this game will ramp up. Kind of reminds me of like a Juno First, if you've ever played that, a little bit. And this is a bomb you can pick up. Score-based game, and pretty challenging game. It just fits what would have been like in the arcade. I could see this game being in the arcade back in the day. There was a boss you'd have to get. I'm pushing up on the controller because the Atari only had one button. but they did a good job of managing that. You get an extra life every level you make. They may have adjusted that in the arcade and did it by score instead. But yeah, this is one of my favorite games to play on the Atari 2600. Every level there's like something added, and I thought that was always neat on the Atari 2600. You're not always seeing the same thing over and over. So now we got some asteroids coming at us. But yeah, this game will, like I say, get really hard and really fast. And this game was on a lot of, it was on the, I believe this was on the Intellivision, and I believe the ColecoVision also, and every version is a real good game. But anyway, it would have been pretty neat to have this in the arcade. Maybe they would have had to make some adjustments. But I can see this one being in the arcade back in the day. Let's jump into my third title. All right, so the third title I have, like I said, no particular order. We're going to stay with the space theme, and I chose Mega Mania. This is a space nightmare if you've ever played this game. Enemies come down at just crazy ways, and you kind of got to know how they're coming down to attack them. Let's just jump into a little gameplay of this, and I'll show you it, and see why this might have been a great game to be in the arcade. All right, guys, so let's play a little bit of Mega Mania. You have your energy bar there. I always love the sounds and the different enemies in this game. Steerable bullets, the way I'm playing. The faster you get that, all the ships, the more points you'll get with your energy bar. But you can see the different enemies, how these are attacking me a little bit different now. And if you don't know how to attack them, you are going to die pretty quick in this game. So you have probably been dropping some quarters learning these different patterns. This is a little bit different than a lot of games that were in the arcade. And I love this game on the Atari 2600. You basically go through, I don't know how many different enemies. I died there. But once you've gone through maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 or more different types of enemies, then it would start over and be definitely harder. Always love this game, and it was a game I think would have been great in the arcade just because of how addicting it is and different it is than a lot of games that would have been in the arcade. Alright guys, so let's look at it. We got two more games I want to look at today that I think would have been great games in the arcade. The next one I chose, River Raid. That's a favorite by a lot of people, and I think this has been an excellent game in the arcade. This was ported to several systems, never in the arcade. Let's take a look at River Raid and a little bit of gameplay. Alright guys, we're going to take a look at River Raid. River Raid is one of the best games on the Atari 2600, considered by a lot of people. And there's no reason it would have been a great arcade game. It's a score-based game. Decisions have to be made on your speed, if you need fuel, because you could speed your plane up or make it go slow. You had to go through these different sections. You get so many points, then you could earn an extra ship. But yeah, very good game. Like I said, score-based. Most games in the arcade were score-based, and this would have been right up the alley of that. In this game, you could not fly over land. You had to fly over the water, which made it a little more difficult. They also had a sequel to this game, River Raid 2, but I always liked this one a lot better. You see, I'm getting low on fuel there, so yeah, you can slow up and get some fuel. Like I said, a lot of decisions had to be made, and super fun game with tight controls. I think this would have been an excellent game in the arcade if it would have been ported to the arcade at the time. All right, guys, let's look at one more game from Activision. So the last game that I chose that I thought would be a good port to the arcade, and let me tell you, there's other games you could choose for sure from Activision that would have been great games in the arcade. But the last one I chose was a little bit different one, Stampede. You know, like I said, a lot of space shooters back in the day. I think Stampede would have been big in the arcade. You know, I love playing this game. Herding the cattle and trying to kick them up back to the front before they got by. You could only let somebody go by. Super fun game, and if you don't know what you're doing, this would have been a quarter eater too. So let's jump into some Stampede gameplay. All right, guys, Stampede. I think this would have been a great game in the arcade. Simple controls. All you had to do was move up and down and hit your button to send the lasso out to try to rope the cattle or the calves. Simple, but very hard game to master. Different point values for the calves. You kind of had to know how to keep them in front of you, because the number at the top, if you let 3 go by, then you are done for this game. This would have been something different in the arcade, and people were always looking for something different. So that's why I chose this game. I ended up playing this game all the time, Stampede. Super great game. Gotta know the patterns, Tim. A little bit rusty at it, to say the least. You start getting those yellow ones in there, they get fast. They come at you fast, and you gotta kick them out front. They go in a sequence here. But anyway, guys, I think this would have been a great arcade game if it would have been released to the arcade. All right, guys, that was a look at some games I thought Activision did that were great games. They were good enough to be arcade games if that would have worked out back in the day. And they could have maybe made some money on those in the arcade. Guys, I want to thank you for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, keep on gaming, guys.